Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, it was a very busy week. A lot of important decisions. Legislation was approved by Mexican legislators, in particular affecting the amparo system, which is this habeas corpus system. And we will have the opportunity to analyze in more detail in other shows um, how this affects basically your rights, especially if you live in Mexico. But the other big news this week was the storms that hit various states, at least 5 or 6 states, with close to almost 75 deaths have been reported and similar numbers of people who've disappeared. And it has raised once again the question mark as to whether the Mexican government is ready and prepared to confront these types of storms. Joining us once again today is Michel Rossengaus. All of you who've been following the show throughout the years know who he is. He's been, every time I look you up, Michel, I always feel bad because I think we always end up talking about some type of disaster or another. He used to head the meteorological system in Mexico. He's now a consultant, very knowledgeable about the weather in Mexico. Michel, welcome to the show. President Claudia Sheinbaum, in her statements, came out and said there was just no way to know that these storms were going to be so aggressive and that it was going to rain so much, in a way justifying the very poor reaction by the Mexican government, I would say, from the federal, state, and local level. Is there a problem with anticipating these storms? Welcome to the show, Michel.
Well, it's always difficult to forecast the meteorology part of the atmosphere, but the fact is that we have a lot of tools, and these are typically numerical model tools, which
Mm-hmm.
are huge computer programs which work in very large computers. Some of them are not in Mexico, and actually operate on the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
But or most of these tools that we have and which the National Meteorological Service uses forecasted from maybe 5 days before that there was going to be a sequence of days that was going to rain very strongly in the area of La Huasteca. And they actually presented this information in the open media, and it was very well presented in the sense that it was mentioned as a critical phenomena. So it is possible to know that this is going to happen. There is no 100% certainty about anything, but the probability that was going to happen was high enough in order to take action. And of course, the experimental results after the fact show that we didn't take the action that was necessary to take. And the result is that mainly that we have between 60, 65 or more dead people and at least 65 disappearances, which are people who have not been found. Uh, which may increase the number of deaths because of the system. But
Right.
not only was it possible to do it, but federal government agency did it
Mm-hmm.
well and presented the information well on the media.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that once that part was known, and it was known and repeated for several continuous days, the information didn't arrive to the people who have to take action, the people who live in the area. And I don't have data to explain why. I can only speculate about these things. But there is a problem in the transfer of this critical information, emergency information, to
Mm-hmm.
the actual population that lives in the risky area, because people, they say that they didn't receive any information. Maybe they receive it in a way that didn't produce the action that was necessary.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, part of the problem also now is that the discussion is now whether the problem is the disappearance of this fund fideicomiso, these funds that were always present during prior administrations, known in Spanish as Fonden, which was a fund that both state and local governments could access to be able to react to these natural disasters. So the discussion is kind of is now, oh, the problem is Fonden. But my impression is, regardless whether there's enough resources to help these communities that have been affected by these storms, I think the Fonden discussion is important in the short term and the long term. But the problem, it seems to me, is that the coordination that is required both at the federal, state, and local level does not exist. So who is responsible? I mean, Protección Civil, civil protection, is under the Secretary of Public Security, who has all these other activities now. You have civil protection, which had been up until recently a pretty independent, very technical institution, which is now headed by somebody doesn't have that profile. And there's an issue of resources and whether this person has the know-how and kind of the credibility to coordinate both the Army and the Navy, who also play an important role. So is it an issue of the structure, or who's responsible? Who's politically responsible? The president?
I think that the disappearance of Fonden would explain the speed of response of the government after the fact. But it doesn't explain the lack of action when the information was given with opportunity. So there is a problem of the full system, in the sense that they probably have been hit by cuts in the budget, and they probably have been cut in the quality of the people who they need to actually confront all of these different dangers that Mexico has. We have an encyclopedia of different dangers in Mexico, and each one requires some special knowledge about this and some capability of computing things, of calculating things, calculating risk, etc., etc. I don't think that the people who are at the local level, at the municipal level today in the civil protection system have that kind of let's say, preparation or experience. And also that most of them, or very many of them, are changed every 3 years when the government of the municipality changes. And that's something which is very bad. I mean, they say that you need about 5 years of full-time concentration on a specific topic to become an expert on the topic. They last at most 3 years. So that's not a good thing. The other thing is that the present administration has told us directly that the science is not as important as they told us. That having this kind of a profound knowledge about what's going to happen or what can happen is not necessarily more important than other things like loyalty and things like that. It is very important. It is very important, and I believe that we have been losing capabilities in the government to do this. We have been gaining other things, but not capabilities in this specific topic.
Well, Mexico's civil protection system was renowned around the world. I mean, it had an extraordinary reputation, in part because it was perceived to be a lot of coordination, good coordination, the ability to anticipate the disasters, to mobilize people, to mitigate the impact of the disasters or the storms on the population, and then the ability to recuperate and reconstruct relatively fast. And I think they've lost the reputation, in part, I think, because of the loss of these funds, the Fonden. So where are they going to get the resources immediately when they have these types of disasters? And two, it's just the coordination, the responsibility of informing the population. So with that said, could you just tell our audience, so we start informing our audience, that there's a couple of storms coming up next week that could be somewhat dangerous and that we have to pay attention?
Yeah, fortunately, both are systems which may not happen, but we cannot bet on that at all. We have to be careful about these systems, and these last systems of the season tend to be very not necessarily powerful, but very destructive, precisely because the population is not expecting anything after September. But we have a system which has, for now, it has a very low probability of developing, but its trajectory, it's advancing in the direction of the Caribbean Sea, and it perfectly may hit the Yucatan Peninsula. So right now it has only 30% probability of developing, and it's far away in time. It will take about at least 1 week to actually happen something in Mexico, but it's something that we have to be vigilant about. And the other one is an old system that has been there for a lot of time in the Pacific coast of
Right.
Mexico, very close to Chiapas and Oaxaca, that has had a up to 60% probability of developing, but in the last few days it has come down to 40%. That doesn't mean that it's not going to form. It means that it's less probable that it will form. So we have to be careful about these two things. Again, we have to be very careful about what we were not expecting. We have to continue expect the worst to be prepared for it.
Michel Rossengaus, you've been joining us throughout the years. I really appreciate you sharing your information, and hopefully you'll come back next week with better news in terms of what's happening to these storms. I really appreciate you joining us here on Living in Mexico.
Bye.
Thank you so much. That was Michel Rossengaus. He headed the meteorological system agency in Mexico. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. You're listening and watching Living in Mexico.